UDL is an education model that aims at catering for all learners with differing learning needs. This means that there's not just one way of teaching a student. The model goes away from the theory of one size fits all.
So Design for Learning is the tool to ensure that all learners are included.
To ensure that I incorporate the first principle into my lessons, especially at the beginning of a unit, I'm going to make sure that I present the information in a variety of different ways so that it caters to all students and all of their learning preferences. So I'll have instructions and information on the board, but I'll also make sure that the information is provided to the students in a digital form, so they'll be able to access it on their own devices, so then they can make changes to any text and also receive verbal instructions and a visual video as well of the actions that we're doing. And all of these instructions will include an explanation of any new symbols that will be used throughout the unit and hopefully increase their engagement.
When I'm presenting a new unit, I'll quite often use a PowerPoint with a lecture, so I'm talking about each slide so they can get a visual representation of what I'm talking about. I like to try and find something that they can relate to, so I'll use a YouTube clip or something like that, a cartoon, something that's a little bit cool. Always handouts with the main points. I like to use handouts. I've put text in boxes of the main key ideas.
The first part of UDL is representation. How I'm going to do this in PE is ensure that my introduction caters for all the students, like we've already said. For the lesson that I've chosen is a football skill, such as shooting, so I'm going to try and break down the skill into 4 sections. And firstly, I'm going to ask them for their feedback on how they think the skill will be performed correctly.
After my initial introduction of a new unit, I'll try and do a language activity, which means the students working in groups, and any new vocabulary or technical terms they will find a definition themselves using different reference books. They can use different references, they can use books, textbooks, they can get online, they can go around and look for examples in the art room, and from that research they will create their own definitions of the terms, and that will go onto our vocabulary wall, which we also use as criteria. So when they get further on into their projects, they have that criteria and language there to help them as a scaffold.
The principle is provide multiple means for action expression. Obviously, in the past, in PE lessons or even lots of other lessons, there was only one way of recording the data, or there was only one way of expressing their knowledge. Whereas in my PE lesson, I'd hope that they could express, like I said before, by demonstrating or just describing what the correct way of doing something is. The underlying concept that I'm going to use in this game, or the method I'm going to use, is a method called TGFU, which is Teaching Games for Understanding. Now, Teaching Games for Understanding advocates that novices start to learn skills through games at their own level in a manner that promotes enjoyment, participation and satisfaction. So I think that would be really important for the students. So it will be irrelevant if they're a lower level ability or they're a high level ability, they'll get something out of what they're learning. And the good thing about Teaching Games for Understanding is it's more of a discovery model rather than a command style model. So they take what they want to learn from it, or what is important to them from the learning experience.
Principle will be incorporated into my lesson as I provide the students with lots of choice. So they'll get choice around the movements that they choose to use and how they express their knowledge, and the sequences that they choose as well. I'm going to use group work in the lesson to help build the learning community and the environment within the class. And the students will self-regulate their own actions as they assess their own social responsibility during the lesson and at the end. And lastly, they'll receive constant task-oriented feedback from me that relates to the overall goal.
The unit is on portraiture, so they need to come up with evidence of a portrait. So in that case, I'll always make sure that there's a lot of scaffolding in place for them. Offer the unit in steps, so each task is challenging but it's also achievable. In this in this way, I use a lot of group exercises and group critique sessions so that they can judge from their peers and then themselves their assessment on how they're going. The third principle is about multiple means of engagement, and if it's a set task, sometimes that can be a little bit tricky because they have only got one way of presenting their work. But I can offer a lot of choices in them when they choose their subject matter to paint, and that way they can choose things that are relevant to them and they can relate to, which motivates them to want to do it.
Kids are all different. We learn in different ways. When it's different, it's fun. That's what makes me want to do it. My teacher helps me understand what I'm learning and why. He shows me how to learn and helps me when I get stuck. I use lots of different things to learn, like iPads. I use books. And I like drawing pictures and writing and handwriting. And I like playing games outside with my teacher. And I like doing folk dancing. I'm getting so good at learning. One day I'll know everything.